I always find it the hardest to talk about my favorite bands. Hey everybody, welcome to Listography. Jason, Joe, and Crams are here. The people have spoken. This one was a poll that we put up on the channel, and we had the band, the Allman Brothers, the Doobie Brothers, and Santana duking it out. The band won pretty easily, so that's what we're doing this week. I have heard all of these albums before, extremely familiar with the initial 7-album run of the band, and then a little less familiar with the reunion albums. I've heard each of those maybe a couple times each, but wasn't super familiar. But how about you guys?
I other than the first two, not much. A little bit of Northern Lights, Southern Cross, Schizophilia, and that was slightly more popular. But I had no idea about Cahoots, or I don't even think I'd ever heard Stage Fright before. None of the later reunion stuff without Robertson. So I'm pretty much the band novice. It was interesting reading about sort of the dynamic in the group and them backing Dylan and then Robertson leaving. And for, such a legendary band, they didn't have that many studio albums kind of all together. So it's an interesting discography for sure.
I knew Big Pink, Self-Titled, Stage Fright, Greatest Hits, and Last Waltz all really well. Didn't listen to Northern Lights, Southern Cross until Jason brought it up in Albums of the Year. So that was the first time I listened to it. This would be the second time. This is the first time listening to Islands and everything else. And I've always considered myself a big fan of the band. That hasn't changed, and I will elaborate later.
All right, who wants to kick it off?
I'll start it off, because I'm going to start it off with a 1-star review of High on the Hog. Woof. Now, I know there are some band loyalists in this threesome and out there watching that are going to be like, come on, it's not that bad, ... Well, before I give my reasoning on why I think it's awful, there's no doubt the album cover is just abysmal. It looks like Trent Reznor was like an animator on Space Jam or something and got like the evil villain, and I don't know. It's bizarre and doesn't fit. It doesn't fit the band at all. Like, it's just terrible. All right. This is a 1-star album. Starts off with Stand Up, which automatically just starts off letting you know that it's like the furthest from classic band material you'll ever get. It's a terrible opener. It's really glossy, overproduced, sucks all of the soul that you love from the band right out. The guitar solo is all flair, no tact or taste. It's just the farthest they've ever been from themselves. The whole thing is just like a big fluff piece, whether it's that smooth, puny bar rock, overproduced type stuff, or sappy ballad type stuff like Where I Should Always Be. For the first 10 minutes, I thought Stand Up was one of the worst songs I've ever heard and easily the worst in their catalog. And then came Free Your Mind. Granted, they didn't write a lot of this material, but they did select it, which is also Yeah, Forever Young, thanks to Bob Dylan, is tolerable. I really hated this album. That is as dark as it gets with my band review. So at number 10, High on the Hog. Yikes, 1 star.
All right, well, that's also my last place, but a slight rebuttal to Cramser's dissing. The cover, terrible. It looks like a Nintendo kind of like cover art, like back when they would just give it to some American who had no idea what the game was about, and you just kind of like the Mega Man cover. Like that's what it reminds me of. Just completely ridiculous, terrible cover. That's fine. I don't think it's terrible. This is a 2.5-star album for me. It's vaguely band sounding. It's not really band sounding. You can really tell this is not the original band. They're missing Richard Manuel and Robbie Robertson, of course. But, I didn't mind the covers. I think doing Free Your Mind, which was originally made popular by In Vogue, is pretty hilarious. And I actually give them mad props for that because usually you don't see that. And I think that's a bold choice. Not terrible, kind of fun, kind of liked it. Yeah, I mean, it's too glossy. It's too sort of easy listening, adult contemporary. But I still think the song selection that they chose isn't bad. I do like the live version of She Knows that has Richard Manuel on vocals that they recorded, obviously. It would have been at least 10 years before, since he died in, I think, 86. So, there's some good songs. Trevor Young and Crazy Mama by J.J. Cale. A couple of Bob Dylan's on here. I really don't like Ramble Jungle, the last one that has, I forget who sings on it, but it's not somebody in the band. I could do without that one. But it's not like a Long Road to Eden style disaster in my mind. So it was fine, but it obviously isn't a good album. It's just not as bad as Cramsley says.
All right, so it's also my number 10, High on the Hog.
God, thank God. I don't care what the rest lists are like. That just, thank God.
But I like it. I think it's pretty good. It's a 3-star for me. I think all of their records are enjoyable. I totally agree about the album cover. Really bad. And what it reminds me of, I have another analogy. I don't know if anyone has seen or remembers the album cover Dirty, Rotten, Filthy, Stinking Rich by Warrant. Looks like it could be maybe the same artist that drew it. Very kind of similar feel. I think it's good. I think it's an enjoyable listen. I don't think it's great. I think the magic is kind of gone, but still decent. Some of the covers work, some of them not so much. The En Vogue one, I think works pretty well musically. Just lyrically, coming from Leave on Home doesn't make any sense, especially the verse where he says, like, I forget the exact lyrics, but it's like, I like rap music and wear hip hop clothes, but it doesn't mean I sell dope. Hearing Leave on Home sing that doesn't really make a lot of sense, but I think musically and melodically, it's fine and an okay listen. The rest of the album's okay too. I think the highlight is Where I Should Always Be. I think that's a pretty great tune, kind of hidden in there, but yeah, it's good. It's a 3-star record. Not going to blow you away or anything like that, but I think it's fine.
Well, I mean, for me, you kind of tapped into what I love about the band, which is their soul and the way they communicate. Like, you really feel like you're part of like the brotherhood of these guys when you're listening to their early stuff, and feel like the choice to just like completely abandon that on that album is just blows my mind. I don't like understand one decision they made on that entire record. All right, my number 9, we're in much higher territory now at 2.5 stars, which means I think it's decent. I've got Moondog Matinee. I kind of run into these albums a lot with various artists once we get into their discographies where, I mean, the band cover a lot of people's songs, no doubt, but this one straight up, much older, upbeat blues, R&B stuff. And so it's pretty hit or miss. Some of it I like a good bit. Holy Cow isn't bad. I'm not crazy about Ain't Got No Home. I tend to like the slower, soulful stuff of the early stuff. So this one is at times a little, just a little bit too perky for me. I think Share Your Love With Me is really well played. Mystery Train is awesome. I think Mystery Train is really good on this. Promised Land, not bad. Yeah, it's just kind of a safe, I believe they said they made this record because they were kind of started the infighting and kind of ran out of ideas. They had been touring a lot. So this was just kind of a, hey, we're under contract. We're going to put something out. Here it is, Save, not great. I don't think Manuel is the right choice for that song. It's somewhat enjoyable, but overall pretty forgettable. I won't listen to it ever again, but I didn't mind listening to it this time. So my number 9, Moondog Matinee, 2.5 stars.
Also my number 9. I don't know. There's something missing from this one. I think the infighting sort of crippled this one before it really ever got off the ground. I don't think these songs work that well for the band. You'd think they would, but I don't feel it on this. I don't feel like the feelings I feel on the earlier albums when they were really sort of, in harmony, so to speak. These kind of feel like they're going through the motions, picked out a bunch of songs they like, tried to cover them. But it feels like, they're sort of just trying to get another album out instead of really kind of coming together and doing something interesting. I don't think the songs are bad or anything, but it just I don't know, nothing grabbed me off of this. And I looked at the track list first and I thought, okay, this should be pretty good. There's some good names on here, but kind of disappointing. Might be more disappointing than bad. Maybe it's just because it's the original group, original members. You expect it coming after, it's only 1973 here, but to put out something like this, kind of disappointing. So 3 stars for me for Moondog Matinee.
You said you felt like something was missing. To me, it kind of felt like, I like the song choices. They should work in theory, but it seems like they didn't take the time to make them their own. They just kind of like learned them and recorded them. And that's it.
Yeah, I think I agree with that.
All right, my number 9 is Jericho, which is the first of their reunion albums or partial reunion albums. All of these records, spoiler alert, are at my bottom. This one definitely sounds better than High on the Hog. A little bit more rootsy, a little more natural. They seem a little bit more comfortable on this one. I think their version of Atlantic City works really well. I love that song. I don't think anyone can do it injustice. It just always seems to work. You've got one track with Richard Manuel singing, who by this time had already passed away. So they're using an old take for the track Country Boy, which I think is good. But yeah, it's kind of like I said about the last one. It's good. It's a nice listen, but it's not really the band. It doesn't really feel like it has that same magic. So decent, not great. Still at 3 stars for me.
Yeah, I agree by saying it's decent. 2.5 stars for Jericho. My number 8, obviously, like Jason said, really missing the identity of the band. But the songs are tolerable. Some of them are really good. I like Caves of Jericho a lot. Hate the Atlantic City cover. I agree that it's an amazing song. I don't think they do it well at all. I think they take all of the drama out of it. And I definitely agree that this album doesn't just sound better than Hog, but it actually sounds really good. It's one of their better sounding albums for a band used to producing albums 20 years prior to this, or whatever, 15. It sounds really good. They didn't fall into that trap of like an older artist just ruining with that 90s production. This was 93, 94 or whatever. But yeah, I think it sounds pretty sharp. And I think Danko and Helm kind of make a lot of the stuff their own, but it is missing, obviously, Robbie a lot. That hurts. I think Too Soon Gone is a good example of them doing what they can. I don't like that version of Country Boy or Move to Japan. And I kind of like Amazon, but I think that background noise track is kind of ridiculous. But yeah, 2.5 stars. Number 8, Jericho.
My number 8 is going to be Jubilation. It's another 3-star down here at the bottom, but it's not bad. It's stripped down. It's simpler. They kind of, High on the Hog, they may have gotten a little too into the whole 90s production, kind of adult contemporary. This sounds a lot more natural for the band, but it's still, mostly, a lot of covers, some original stuff. And I think, High Cotton's not bad. I don't know who Paul Jost is, who wrote Book Faded Brown, but I like that song. Eric Clapton's on here doing some guitar work on Last Train to Memphis. Some more, Bound by Love by John Hyatt, White Cadillac, who I guess the band wrote. They brought in some other songwriters. It's hard to tell who's writing what. But it's a fine listening. Nothing spectacular, but it's a nice sort of last gasp effort to bring the boys together and put out something enjoyable.
All right, my number 8 is also Jubilation. Don't have a lot to say about it that's different from the last 2 that I talked about. It's just another one of these reunion records. This is the only one of those records, though, that has more original tracks than covers. And I think that makes a big difference in kind of giving it the edge. Just slightly better songs. None of them really ascend to any kind of greatness, but it's all pretty decent. So yeah, another good one. I think this one just barely edges out the other 2, but staying at the 3-star mark for me.
I also have Jubilation. Number 7, I've got it at 2.5 stars, but this is considerably closer to 3 stars than Jericho. I think that it definitely helps that they're starting to write their own material. I like Book Faded Brown, but I hated the line about the rainbow being like God's tears or whatever. Sure, someone in the comments would be like, well, they didn't write the lyrics. Well, don't pick the songs then if it has bad lyrics. But I think it's pretty decent. I think Don't Wait is actually a really, really good song. It's one of the only songs of the like last three that kind of jumped out as me as like a possible contender for my top 10 favorite band songs. It didn't even come close, but it's the only one that I had like highlighted. I also thought that Last Train to Memphis and High Cotton, like Joe said, were pretty good. I think the album is probably falls off a cliff at the midpoint, and then I think it gets a bit too horn heavy for me towards the end, which kind of ruins the mood of it and not my favorite taste of the band. So the whole thing is a bit like Band by Numbers, kind of like an imitation of what like their old Expected Ways might be, but it's enjoyable and could have been a step in a good direction, like a good transition record with them kind of finding their footing again. But obviously it was the last one. So 2.5 stars, number 7, Jubilation.
I got Jericho at my number 7, another 3-star album, totally enjoyable, fine production. I think they sound really good. I think The Caves of Jericho is by far their best song that they wrote after they got back together without Robertson. It's a pretty cool, storytelling song, and the spirit of Dylan and, early band stuff. I think Blind Willie McTell is a really good cover, sounds really great. Atlantic City's okay. In general, I think all the covers work pretty well on this. And, I think it sounds better than the ones that came after it. It sounds like a real band putting real music. The other ones, I don't know, they just don't have like a natural sound to me, sort of trying to fit their sound into sort of the current landscape. On this one, it sounds natural. It sounds good. Pretty much Blind Willie McTell and Caves of Jericho. Give it enough to put it over the other ones, but it's pretty much the same. They're pretty much all 3-star albums. I'll never listen to them again, but I didn't hate it.
All right, my number 7, and getting into the original 7 album run of the band, bumping up here to a 3.5 star album, I have Moondog Matinee. This record was not that well received when it came out, and you can see why. It's pretty disappointing in comparison to stuff that came before it. But I think it's one of those records where you kind of have to adjust your expectations to appreciate it. I think it's pretty good. Some good covers. Share Your Love With Me is great, I think. The playing on the whole record is really good, and that's really the reason to listen to it, is for the playing, not so much the songs themselves. Obviously, they're just old kind of like rock and roll songs. The idea behind the record was to play all the old songs that they played in their set list back when they were Levon and the Hawks, and that didn't exactly end up happening. I think there's only one song on the record that they used to play in their old sets, but that's kind of the idea of just getting back to the music they grew up on and that they were playing when they were coming up. I think it's good. The songs are good. It's a fun listen. It's not great, not going to blow you away, but I think it's a good album.
All right. My number 6, still at 2.5 stars. It's the last 2.5 star. This one was pretty disappointing. I was excited to listen to it because I never did. Cahoots. Got that Van Morrison influence, obviously, and, more jazzy and loungy style at times. I think these guys are amazing players. That's kind of like the glue that holds everything together. But I think they're overplaying on this album. Too much going on sometimes. Don't really let some of the songs breathe. But like on a song like Last of the Blacksmiths, I think somewhere in there's a beautiful song with like great lyrics, but kind of just gets a little polluted. And like when they do like the na 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 breakdown on like where do we go from here, that seems a little awkward too. Like I just think they're doing too much. And one thing I love about the band is, they cover so many songs in their early stuff and have so many different singers. And Robbie Robertson's doing writing and different perspectives and different storytelling techniques. But there's always like this clear identity and unique, like one singular like vision and just like effort. This one almost sounds like there's just too many like perspectives going on. So it just feels a little messy to me, the whole album. I do think there are good songs on it, for sure. When I Pay My Masterpiece, really good. But, I don't think it stands up to the other stuff of the band's best work. So 2.5 stars, number 6, Cahoots.
I got another 3-star album coming at you. It's Islands. This literally was made to get out of their contract and described as sort of their odds and sods, but it's not nearly as good as that. I don't know what to say about this. I mean, it's got the classic lineup. It's got all the main players, but it just kind of feels thrown together. I think the biggest knock for me is the cover of Georgia on My Mind, which, I mean, you better be good and you better do it right if you're going to play a song like that. I think it sucks on this album. Not even close to Ray Charles. It just sounds so pallid in comparison. And then other than that, Christmas Must Be Tonight is fine, and I like the song of Pipote Rouge, but everything else is kind of anonymous stuff that they had in the vault and threw together, and literally exactly what this album was. So, Islands, 3 stars. It's fine. I'm talking like it's terrible, but it's okay. It's a okay album, slightly better than all the other ones that I've mentioned before.
We just talked about this yesterday on Good Music America.
I know. 3 stars. It's totally fine. There's some good playing on here, some nice horns. I don't know what you want from me.
I disagree with that assessment, but it is also my number 6. I have Islands. I have it at 4 stars. I think it's really good. Very solid record. Kind of slow, mellow. Definitely sounds like a band on the verge of breaking up, which they were. Shortly after this, they would do The Last Waltz and break up. But I don't know. I just really like it. There's kind of like a sadness hanging over the whole thing. It's kind of mellow. Maybe that makes it hard to really get into because there's not much on here that's very upbeat. It's kind of a sleepy record, but I think it's really good. Top-notch songs on it, I think. Right as Rain is great. Christmas Must Be Tonight. I think Richard Manuel's vocals on Georgia on My Mind are great. I think the thing that keeps this at a 4-star and not at the level of the other albums that I have coming up is the production. It's a little bit like late 70s, smoothed out a little almost not quite yacht rocky, but teetering on that sort of sound. But the songs are strong enough and the performances are good enough that it doesn't really matter that much. So I think it's a really good record. Very underrated.
I agree. It is underrated. I have it at number 5. I have it at 3 stars, which means I think it's a good album. I don't think it's really good, but I think it's good. Yeah, I got the first notes I've got are modern 70s soft rock, little poppy, yacht rock I've got written down. The title track with like the strings sounds like it's like an opener for a late 70s sitcom, like almost. But yeah, I'm with Jason on this. Not as good as Ray Charles, but nothing to complain about with his performance on Georgia on My Mind. I think Knockin' Lost John is good. Right as Rain and Streetwalker, I love the way it starts. I don't really like Let the Night Fall or Ain't That a Lot of Love, but I really like Christmas Must Be Tonight. So overall, I think there's a larger majority of songs that I think are pretty good here. But, the reason why, even though I think songwriting is pretty darn good, I think it's just not the style and the production and the vibe of the band that is their sweet spot. But it was a pleasant surprise because I was under the impression that this album was just absolutely hated by fans, but I thought it was pretty good. So number 5 with 3 stars, Islands.
I'm going to say something really mean about Richard Manuel right now, and I don't mean to be mean, but I like his voice less on every subsequent album. From what, I listened to them in order of when they came out for this. I love his voice on Music for Big Pink. I think it's phenomenal. And then something happens. By the time we get to Islands, I just don't find that magic anymore. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm just crazy, but it sounds like maybe Cramser sort of agrees.
I 100% agree. It literally, the catalog starts with Tears of Rage, where I think that's his best vocal performance. And then it just slowly, but I also think that's just the magic of the band. Like, we'll see as my albums go on, but by the time you get to this album, it doesn't sound like Music from Big Pink at all.
Oh, well. All right, good. I'm glad I'm not totally insane on that. Moving on to my number 5, right? It's my turn, yes. I got Cahoots. And I like this album. I think when I pay my masterpiece, obviously, having the Dylan tracks kind of helps. I'm not a Dylan acolyte by any mean, but I really like his writing, not so much the performing all the time, but a band like The Band, I think really does it justice, really does it well, kind of livens it up for my personal taste. So you kind of get the best of Dylan, songwriting and the best of the band's, great instrumentalists and arrangers. So love that track. The Van Morrison guest appearance on 4% Pantomime, I like a lot too. In fact, I really like the first half of the album. I think side 1 is really good. And then side 2 kind of lets me down a little bit. I think Shootout in Chinatown, they bring in that sort of like cheesy, not racist, but like that the China, like na 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 na, kind of mix it in. It's a little hokey, don't like it much, but I think the playing sounds really great on this. I think they still sound excellent. This is 71, so they're still in their peak. They're still great instrumentalists, some great bass work on here, but it's just not quite at the level of their best work. I think it's a 3.5 album, 3.5 stars. They're kind of falling apart, but I think they're still kind of hanging on this one. So it's a good album, 3.5 stars.
I think that borderline, that sort of stereotypical Asian trope only kind of works in A Passage to Bangkok by Rush and nowhere else.
Not Turning Japanese by the Vapors?
Good shout.
How about Made in Japan by Buck Owens?
Oh my God. Is this going to be the side 3?
All right. My number 5 is Northern Lights, Southern Cross. And I think safe to say I'm the biggest band fan of the three of us. And I am already up to a 4.5 at my number 5 here. I think this record's killer. Another really underrated record, full of really good songs. Forbidden Fruit, Ophelia, It Makes No Difference, one of my all-time favorite songs. Really not too much to complain about. I think the last 2 tracks maybe peter out a little bit. And it has a little bit of the same issue, but not as much that Islands has, where this is kind of their California record. So it has a little bit of that kind of California sound to it, which doesn't quite have the same kind of mystique and mystery that their early records have. But it's great. The songs are great. The playing's great. The vocals are great. Love it. Really good.
By California record, you mean recorded in California, right? Because it's not about California.
Right. Yeah, they recorded it in California. Although, I mean, they recorded most of the self-titled record in California too, but this has that California sound a little bit more than that.
I also am about to talk about Northern Lights, Southern Cross. It's my number 4. I've got it at 3.5 stars, and it's really close to 4 for me, but it's just kind of like brings a little bit of a mixed bag. I think there's a lot of great, terrific songs, performances. Probably hurts that my least favorite song on the album is probably Forbidden Fruit, which comes right off the bat, and it's just like a little bit too on the nose and plain and like allegory for them. And the songs have like these nice wallowing narrator characters, which I think are done well, but for some reason kind of nag me at times. I think Hobo Jungle is decent. Ophelia isn't my favorite of like their big hits. I guess now that I look at it, the problem is it just starts off kind of sluggish for me because most of my favorite stuff comes later. And I think some of that 60s country soul kind of vibe that they really knocked out of the park early on is starting to get taken over by more like Van Morrison R&B things. I kind of felt like listening to this and the subsequent stuff. It's just like, man, I really like Van Morrison stuff. Ring Your Bell is a cool jam. Jason's right. It makes no difference. It's amazing. You know, that down and out sorrow is what they're great at, especially in that, you know, it's almost like the more of that on the albums is what I like more. I like Jupiter Hollow a lot. I think it's great. It's one of my favorites. But yeah, Rags and Bones has killer guitar on it, but the production is really out of place for me at times on it. But overall, you know, the songwriting is really good on this. So 3.5 for Northern Lights, Southern Cross, number 4.
My number 4, I'm still at the 3.5 star mark here. I'm fine with these albums, but they're just not gripping me. There's something missing. And I feel like I should like these more because I love sort of that cosmic American music. And this is kind of like close to it, but it's not quite. I got Stage Fright, number 4, 3.5 stars. Maybe it's just coming off of the first 2 albums that this one's sort of like jarringly different. It's much, production's much cleaner. It's a little more 70s. You can really hear all the instruments really well. It's very bright, a little bouncier, I think, than their first 2. But I don't know. There's just something missing. It's still got all the kind of expansive instrumentation and, the bunch of different, they have organs and clavinets and accordions and saxes and pianos and all sorts of, tons of stuff on here. But it all sounds a little noodly to me. It's just missing that spark, that sort of like concept that really made the band self-titled album kind of great. That Southern sort of accent that is all over that one. And I don't know, I think the W.S. Walcott Medicine Show is a little hokey. Dan on the Sacred Harp, a little too earnest. Just something's missing. I don't know what it is. Just sort of that like mystery and sort of like extra that they brought on their first 2 albums. This one kind of just feels like a really good band putting together an album without sort of that, spark. Maybe it's the lack of Dylan songs on this one. Maybe they drifted too far away from his influence, but I like it. But after Jason made such a big deal out of it, I was expecting a little bit more. So 3.5 stars for me.
Ooh, Joe loves Dylan now. Ooh.
Well, you know why I love it, right?
Yes, you love Todd Rundgren on the boards, but I don't know. I don't, as much as I love Todd Rundgren on lots of stuff, this, I don't know. I don't know if he's a good fit for this band.
My number 4 is another 4.5-star record for me. I have Cahoots. I think it's really good. I think the songwriting is really strong. Life is Carnival is probably what it's best known for. Where do we go from here, though? I like a lot. 4% Pantomime is cool. Thinking Out Loud, I think, pretty good set of songs. I think the guitar playing on this album really stands out as being some of Robbie Robertson's best, I think. I also think Garth Hudson really kind of shines on this record as well. Maybe the 2 of them both doing so much is what you're saying about them overplaying, but I don't see it that way. I think it's really good, really cool, enjoyable. Love it.
Joe and I seeing pretty eye to eye. I've got number 3 as Stage Fright, 3.5 stars. I wish I could share my screen of my notes because I think Joe said this verbatim. It says, I don't know. I think there's just something missing. And that's how I feel about this album. I don't think they dug deep enough for me. Like the first 2 are so gripping and heart-wrenching, have so much of just like that awesome, hopeful sorrow. With their slow stuff, they can really like lift you out of a hole, like get down in there, grab you put your limp shoulder over their arms and carry you out. That's how I feel about their music when they're at their finest. But something about this just seems a little, just something missing. It's like the album of almost for me. I like Strawberry Wine, but I'm not crazy about Helm's vocals on that. It's got like that ugly ZZ Top kind of sound to me. I like Sleeping a lot. I think Manuel sounds great, even though he's gradually getting worse, like we just talked about. I think maybe it's just too jovial and rompy for me at times, like another Whistle Stop, W.S. Walcott, stuff like that. Shape I'm In, I'm not crazy about. I like it, but yeah, I mean, I like this album. I don't want to say I don't. It's 3.5 stars, which means I think it's really good. But I just think there's the emotional tank, the heartstrings that I love in the first 2, not quite there on this one. Rundgren just fucked it all up. So no, I'm kidding. It's a little bit too it's a little bit too just basic and just straight for me. I need it slower. I need the soul, man. I need it. I need the Canadian soul. It ain't here. They had stage fright. They were about to get emotional and they had stage fright. All right. 3.5 stars. Number 3, stage fright.
Okay, my number 3 is it could be 4 stars. It's like right there. It's on the cusp. And I think the only thing that maybe holds it back is like this is right around when the synthesizers kind of started creeping in. And I love It Makes No Difference, but there's kind of a cheesy synth going on in the background. Kind of kills it for me a little bit. It sort of cuts the emotional message a little bit because I can't, like, I hear it in the back of my mind. I'm like, that would be so much better if it was an organ. That should be an organ. And it kind of happens a bunch on this album. I think the songwriting is all really good. It's all Robbie Robertson compositions. I think maybe drifting a tiny bit, when Jason said California album, kind of get like that Eagles vibe a little bit with this one. Not that that's a bad thing. I love the Eagles, but it sort of creeps in and I can't help but think about the Eagles a little bit when I'm hearing this. And I don't know, I kind of want to keep the band and Eagles separate a little bit. But a lot of good energy on this album. I love the horns. I think Ophelia is pretty great. Love the horns on it. Acadian Driftwood's fantastic. I really do like, I like Manuel and I like Helm and I like Danko. I think they're all good singers. I love when they all sing together. Acadian Driftwood, when they all kind of take the lead. Really liked. I wish they did that a little more, even kind of like they did on their first album. In general, I think this is a pretty good album. Maybe a little too Eagles 70s sounding, a little too much of that synth just creeping in. I love that organ sound. I want the organ sound. But then I'm gonna say 4 stars. I'm gonna say this is a 4-star album. Northern Lights, Southern Cross, my number 3.
All right, my number 3. This is where we get into 5-star territory for me. I've got Stage Fright. I think it's awesome. Sleeping, Time to Kill, Shape I'm In, All of Glory, W.S. Walcott Medicine Show. I think the songs are phenomenal. I wouldn't argue that it's Todd's finest hour, but I do think it has an interesting sound. They recorded this, they rented out this little playhouse in New York and recorded it live on stage. So I think there were certain recording complications that came along with that. Todd talks about being set up outside under a tent where it was just sweltering hot and waiting for people to show up. People were getting into drugs around this point and people would not show up or show up late. And there was a lot of waiting around and waiting to get things right. And so I think the process of recording this record wasn't a super smooth thing, but I think it turned out pretty darn good in spite of all of that. There's a 50th anniversary edition of this record that was remixed and resequenced. Throughout the process of making this record, Robbie Robertson encouraged the other band members to take a part in the writing a little more. So they did, and there's a little more collaboration in that department. But when it came time to sequence the record, Robbie had some of those songs that they participated in kind of buried in the track list. So it became this little political thing where people were upset that their songs were so deep in the track list. So he rearranged it to satisfy other members of the band. And he was unhappy. So with the 50th anniversary, he resequenced it. I think the resequencing really works. A big fan of the new track list. I don't much care for the new mix, though. Bob Clearmountain mixed the 50th anniversary. I think it's way too kind of bright and kind of loses some of that. I mean, it is maybe a little kind of dark sounding in the original version, but something about that works for these songs and the vibe and all of that. So I like it. I think it's great.
Yeah, I've listened to the newer version as well. And I disagree. I don't like the track listing as much, but the sound, it just sounds like too sterile or something weird going on with it that I'm not crazy about. All right. My number 2, I'm in great album territory. Wasn't really good, almost great for Stage Fright. This one is great. For show. 4-star great album for the band, self-titled. Just so many great songs. Cross the Great Divide, Rag Ma to Rag. It's kind of what Joe was talking about, given like that Southern characterization. I kind of like how, the first one seems really personal and authentic, and then this one is kind of like, using borrowed point of views, but they're getting to show off their like storytelling technique a little bit more, which I think works great for this album. I mean, all I can really do is just, I think maybe the first side one is like 5 stars. Side 2 kind of brings it down a little bit for me. Most of my favorite songs on this album are on side 1, but I don't want to say anything too negative because I think 4 stars, great album, 4 out of 5. It's one of the best of that year. I love it. Just really, really love a certain number 1 a little more. So at number 2, 4 stars, The Band.
I concur with Cramser. I got The Band. My number 2, it's right in the middle between 4 and 4.5, I think. It's tough. It's really hard to judge this one because I love the sound of music from Big Pink so much. And while I like the Americana sort of vibe on this one, not quite like Southern Gothic, but it's Southern kind of point of view, not quite a concept album, but interconnected. I think they're going for a certain point of view on this from the South. They do that great. Got kind of like that circus organ that comes in right off the bat on Across the Great Divide and Rag Mama Rag. It's brighter. It's definitely more clean sounding. But in doing that, they lose that like psychedelic sound that I really love on music from the Big Pink. The big organs, the sort of like swirling kind of like mystery of it. So it took me a little longer to warm up to this one than the first one. And I think probably when we were doing the albums of the year, I kind of was like, this is such a come down after music from the Big Pink. I like it more now. I think Whispering Pines is great, sort of in the same style as music from Big Pink. Up on Cripple Creek's got that, awesome, like funky organ and stuff in it. That sounds great. And then I like the second half a lot. I think Look Out Cleveland's a great, like big rock song. Rockin' Chairs, very Americana. I love albums like Tumbleweed Connection from Elton John, and you can kind of see this is probably the basis, the inspiration for all of those like Americana albums that came afterwards. So, I think it's great. The Unfaithful Servant, really kind of cool, sad, Dylan-esque song from Robertson. And I think everybody sounds great on this. I think Helm, in particular, his vocals sound better on this album, probably the best that he ever sounds. And I like the expanded instrumentation, the banjos and the fiddles and everything like that. I just missing that kind of weirdness, psychedelic, swirling sound that I really love on music from Big Pink. So it's a really good album, but it's not in the same league for me as the debut.
Do you guys prefer this version of The Night They Drove Old Dixie or the Allman Brothers?
I prefer the Allman Brothers. That might be my least favorite track on this whole album. I don't know why. It doesn't really register for me very well.
The Band. My number 2 is music from Big Pink. 5-star album. Fantastic. The antithesis of everything that was going on at the time. The year before you had the Summer of Love. The year after you've got Woodstock. And just like right in the middle here in 68, they come out with this rootsy Americana music. It's kind of blues, country, soul, maybe even a little jazz thrown in. It just all blends seamlessly, just oozes feel. All of the songs feel so lived in. You can tell that they like wake up in the morning and play all day, and like they're living it and breathing it, and it's awesome. I just think it's great. One of the greatest records of the 60s. One of my all-time favorite records, but not my favorite by the band.
Was hoping for a trifecta. I don't think we've celebrated a trifecta in a good long while. That was a mistake. It is the best album of the band. 5 stars. Music from Big Pink. And if it weren't for a pesky little Beatles album that year, probably would have won in 68 for me. Love the country soul. You know, this is just sorrow soul is what I like to call it. So earnest and moving. Simply the best they have to offer. Good songwriting everywhere. This just fits the vibe and the sound. Slow, it's kind of honky, like Jason was saying. It's got elements of all of these things, Americana. And just the spirit of the band, like Jason said, lived in. You really feel like you're just part of the group listening to it, like this brotherhood of musicians traveling and telling stories and writing them down, or, you know, hearing other folk songs and playing them the way they want to play them. We've been talking a lot about, and we did yesterday on the morning show, about 5-star albums and what it means. And I don't believe in a perfect album, and you can have a 5-star album without all 5-star songs. But to me, there's not a song you skip on this album at all. It just, everything is so organic and amazing. The soul on it is just amazing. It seems so free and familiar at the same time. And it's this weird blend. Like, I keep using the word sorrow, but the album's also kind of fun. It's like a feel-good album without it being happy. I don't know. It's such a weird, like, it's so hard to pinpoint it. I just think it's great. You know, I think it's like this album is like their therapy, and they're happy. They're so happy to share it with each other and with the listener. And that even like critics of rock music would listen to this and it would just win them over with just like the familiarity and just like the brotherhood of it. Just it's like one of those albums done by, or one of those people you meet where it's just like, oh, how can you not like this guy? Like, that's how I feel about this album. It's just, you have to like it. It's a 5-star album, one of my favorite albums ever. Music from Big Pink, number 1.
Obviously, also my number 1. You know, it didn't make my top 5 in 68. Missed out. It's a 5-star album, no doubt there. And it's weird because I had it written down as number 5, but at the last moment I switched it out for Kinks, or the Village Green Preservation Society. I'm going to stand by that for now, but just a really cool album. I get a little Traffic vibes from it. Maybe it's the psychedelic kind of organ that's all over this. In our Traffic video, I was like, where's my Paper Sun? Like, where's the stuff that kind of sounds like Paper Sun? Kind of on this album, especially like the first half, you know, it's kind of got like that ghostly choruses on some stuff, but it's so all over the place. To Kingdom Come has this ripping guitar solo, which for 68 is like, you know, Clapton-esque level, just, you know, almost shredding. It's not like super overdriven or anything, but I think it sounds fantastic on this. I really like Richard Manuel's contributions, songwriting. You know, I like Robbie Robertson a lot. I like his songs, but I kind of like sort of his, you know, Manuel style on In a Station. He shares his songwriting credit with Bob Dylan on Tears of Rage, which is just an awesome way to start the album. And it's just a really unique album. I agree with what Cramser said. Very sort of like brotherhood, like very lived in. Feels like it's unretouched. Like this is just what they went with. There's nothing fancy about it in the production. This is just like raw, what, you know, play what comes out of us kind of stuff. And it's just real natural. I think having Dylan sort of there with the songwriting credits, and, you know, he was probably there when they were doing some of these songs originally. So I think that definitely helps. I think their cover of This Wheel's on Fire is great. I Shall Be Released, great. There's nothing bad on this album at all. The harmonizing on The Wait, where they do the and in succession higher, is just such a perfect, it's one of the all-time great moments, I think, in rock music. I think Manuel sounds so good on this album. I don't think he'd ever sound quite as good as this again. Something about it, just raw and almost broken. This is my favorite, by far, 5-star album. Music from Big Pink.
All right. Well, my number 1 is the self-titled album, the Brown Album. And for me, this is peak the band. I think it's the ultimate version of what they were going for. I think it's the perfect marriage of their sound, which is like this rootsy country Americana thing. their image, which like the cover photo looks like they're stepping right out of the Civil War. And then the songwriting kind of to match it, so much so that some people even consider this a concept album where all the songs are kind of about an older way of life, an America that has, you know, kind of faded away. I think it all just comes together so well on this record. The songs are great. The playing's great. The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down, Whispering Pines, Unfaithful Servant. Those are probably the standouts for me. Rocking Chair is great as well. The vocals, all of the vocalists on this record are in top form. I just think it's a near perfect record, super of its time, but like completely outside of what anyone else was doing. I think it's phenomenal. So final thoughts on the band. How we feeling about them after listening to the discography?
It's weird for me. It's so hard for me to put my finger on how I feel overall about the band. Obviously, had a lot of like 2.5 kind of forgettable albums and one just atrocious album. And I've always considered them, like, I love the band as part of rock history. I'm so glad they exist. You know, they have so many intangibles. They're so good on The Last Waltz. You know, I love the idea and the story of them and the camaraderie and their dynamic of everyone like doing a little bit of everything. And obviously I love music from Big Pink a lot, but there could be this really dangerous thing where they don't make my top 100 artists, but somehow they have an album that makes like my top 50 of all time. It'll be really interesting to see when we get to those lists. Like, I want them to be one of my favorite artists of all time, but I mean, if you took away music from Big Pink, which isn't really fair, I mean, they wouldn't even come close. So it's weird. It's really weird how I interpret how much I like them. I don't have a good answer, but I really like a lot of those albums a lot, and music from Big Pink especially.
Well, I mean, I kind of feel the same way as you, Cramser. It's almost unfair because everything after music from Big Pink pales in comparison in my mind. So it's like, do I penalize them for having a 5-star album right off the bat, one of the cooler sounding, most unique albums I've ever heard, and never quite living up to that again? Yes, I do penalize them for it. They're not in my top 100. Music from Big Pink probably is not going to make my top 100 albums of all time. Like, it's right there. Like, it's 5 stars. It's in the area. But I just don't love the self-titled as much as most people, most rock critics. And everything just kind of doesn't hit the same way after music from Big Pink. Once you hear that, in my mind, it's like perfection. I want 5 more of these. They didn't do any more of those. And that's always going to hurt them a little bit, because other than that, there's nothing really essential listening in my catalog. I like the band, and I like Northern Lights, Southern Cross, but it's just not something I'm going to go back to. And I kind of like other people's versions of Americana a little bit better. And I like the Eagles better than Northern Lights, Southern Cross. So what am I listening to the band for?
Nah, disagree. But I love the band. They are probably a top 20 all-time artist for me. I love every member of the band. Robbie Robertson, one of my favorite guitarists. Levon Helm's one of my favorite drummers. Rick Danko's one of my favorite bass players. Richard Manuel's a great piano player and singer. I think all 3 singers in the band have amazing voices. Garth Hudson's an amazing multi-instrumentalist, keyboard player. I love the production, the songwriting, and I don't see them on like this downward trajectory like you guys do. I think the entire initial 7 albums are really great. The only one I think I didn't have it at least 4 stars was the covers album, which I also think is enjoyable enough. So, and even among all of my 5-star albums, theirs kind of rise near the top of that crop of records. So I just think they're fantastic. So everybody can let us know what you guys think of the band and how you rank their records, what you think of our lists. And be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, and check the description for links to all of our social media accounts. We will see you tomorrow with our top 10 favorite band songs.